So, hi everyone, welcome to your fourth session, I think this is, of the day, which is focused on the benefits of sport for disabled young people and how we can ensure that the disabled young people that you work with are enabled to access opportunities to take part in sport. So your speakers for this session are all on the screen here. We've got Holly Arnold. She's a F46 Paralympic javelin gold and bronze medalist, Commonwealth champion and European champion, and she's the current 4 times consecutive world champion. At this year's rescheduled Paralympics in Tokyo, Holly won bronze, which is a fantastic achievement. And now she's back in training, preparing for next year's World Championship and the 2023 Paris Paralympic Games. So fantastic to have you here today, Holly. And Donna, since you're next on my screen, we've got Donna Bullivant-Evans from Disability Sport Wales. And she has worked as the development officer for Flintshire at Disability Sport Wales for 18 years. She's focusing on kind of grassroots physical activity and sports opportunities for disabled people of all ages and all ability levels. And she also, for this organisation, she also works as a learning consultant, concentrating on the development and the coordination of inclusive training opportunities. So great to have Donna on the panel as well. Then we've also got Adam McAvoy, and Adam is the National Development Manager for the Wheelchair Football Association, which is a national charity and governing body for the sport of powerchair football. He's worked in disability sport for over a decade, aiming to provide greater opportunity for people to access sporting opportunities. And he has also been awarded a British Empire Medal in the Queen's Birthday Honours List for his services to disabled young people through sport. So fantastic to have Adam here as well. And then last but not least, we have Greer-Aylece Robinson. And Greer is the project officer for West London at Disability Sports Coach. Greer has been involved in sport for as long as she can remember and has been actively pursuing a career in the sports sector for the past 5 years. Advocacy has always been something that Greer has actively done through her coaching and mentoring work. And in her current role, she's excited to grow a disability sports coach and help to ensure that everyone has equal access to sport. So thank you all for joining us here today. We know that it's going to be a great discussion between you all because you all have different experiences and expertise to bring to this discussion. Now, to kind of kick this discussion off, Adam, would you mind telling us a bit more about how accessing sport during education or in a child's younger years supports their physical and mental well-being?
Yeah, will do. Thank you. It's nice to be here. So really thank you to everyone for the invite. I think from my experience, and I'm fortunate enough to have worked in special educational needs education for a number of years before moving into my role now, I think it's quite a cyclical thing for young people to access sport and the benefits. And I think the mental and the mental well-being benefits then affect the physical well-being, and it just continues to progress over time. And I think that I suppose initially it gives that young person something to really focus on, and it's more than just trying to process being a young person with a disability and what that impacts on them throughout life. And I think that then gives them those shared experiences with either peers or siblings, so that if they're involved in a sport or activity, they've got then something in common. It might not be the same sport, it might be an adapted version of it, but it's something that you've got in common with people to be able to discuss and highlight, and it gives you that social bond and that social connection. And then I think from there, with the mental well-being side of things and being active and taking part in a sport, you then start to see the benefits physically through your agility, balance, coordination, all of the key fundamental skills and things that young people work on and develop and they gain through taking part in a sport. They then see that as a physical benefit, and then they recognize that as well. And then it's that repeat process of, I really enjoy it. I'm seeing it's benefiting me physically and I feel great. I've got great connections with friends or with peers. And I just think then that embeds and sets up the young person going forward throughout their young life and into teenage years and early adulthood, and all of the skills transferable elements that people can develop through playing sport, teamwork, communication, all of those things that transfer. And I just think it really, it's a bedrock for young people going forward as they get older.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for that, Adam. Does anyone else have anything to add on that? Anything that they've experienced either in kind of their own career, kind of going through sports as a younger person, or indeed working with young people with disabilities working in sport? Is anyone brave enough to unmute? Have a go.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Verity?
Just does anyone else have any experiences with kind of any of the effects they've witnessed on kind of the young people that they work with, any effects on their physical development and then also their mental well-being as a result of being involved in sport?
Yes, having worked at Disability Sports Coach for almost 2 years now, and worked with young people who are just starting out on their sporting journey, and in an inclusive space, because access to accessible sport is not something that a lot of people have access to. So having worked with young people starting out their journey, and just after 3 or 4 sessions, seeing that light in their eyes from having that opportunity to take part not only in sport but to have that connection with other young people is so rewarding. And not only just from the young people and the people that we work with, from the coaches as well, talking about how they've seen such a difference from working with someone for the first time to 10 sessions down. I've seen it firsthand. It's really good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I definitely think being able to be part of a team as well, because I think a lot of times in sports, obviously, being part of a team is so important. And if you can access sport with your peers, even if they don't have the same level of ability as you, it's fantastic to be able to take part and, be involved with something. I think that's fantastic. Does anyone else have anything to say about that one? I don't know. Donna, here she goes.
Yeah, just to add to that, really, I think whilst I think all of us here would definitely recognise the benefits of being involved in physical activity, but I think for me it's about wider than that as well. So lots of young people that we've had involved in sports and physical activities and clubs and sessions that have been running in the local community, it's had a wider benefit when they've gone back into a school environment, into a college environment, or into an everyday life, because I think some of those things that we do gain from that social interaction in a sport and physical activity space, sometimes that might be some physical skills around, for some young people who might use a wheelchair on a part-time basis. Those are skills that they can take with them, that when they do use a chair in a school environment, they feel a lot more confident with that. And also for some individuals who may acquire an impairment, being in a space where having those interactions and information that they would gain from other people that may have a similar level of impairment or have had similar experiences, especially for those that might be in a mainstream school environment or may never have had any experience around disability or impairment before, and a sports club being a really informal setting for people to gain that information and experience. I think the benefits go way beyond sport at times.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important to bring up, Donna, because obviously a lot of our schools will do a lot of physical activity and physical development within school, but I think it is important to think about, how they can encourage links with, sport in the local community and things like that, kind of those tertiary services as well. So it's not just what they do in school, it's how that interacts with, and it's complemented by everything else around it as well. So I think that's really important to bring up. Thank you. Just to kind of think about, obviously we've chatted about the positives that can arise from disabled young people being involved with sport. Donna, what would you say are the main barriers for students or young people with additional physical needs accessing sport currently in the UK?
I think from experience and delivering training nationally and working with other areas, what we find a lot is around perceptions. So that might be from an individual perspective about what they may be able to do or what they may be able to get involved in, but not just from an individual perspective, that also extend into perceptions and experiences in terms of people not having any experience of physical activity, either the benefits or what's available from a parent's perspective, from a teacher's perspective sometimes, and also in a wider sport and leisure context. We're doing lots of work with lots of disability specific clubs, but also with lots of mainstream clubs that are looking to increase their membership and increase their offer for people in the local area. So I think sometimes that perception and awareness about what can we do to further extend that, so that people are aware of what training is available to make sure that we can provide really good quality positive experiences for people, but also around the ways in which we can quite simply adapt things to make it more appropriate for individuals. So I think perceptions and experiences is huge, and that's a large area of work that we're trying to do in Wales around. We have an inclusive programme called In Sport, which is about trying to support clubs that are either already inclusive or are trying to work towards increasing their offer for disabled participants. We also have disability inclusion training that we run, and that's available as part of our UK Lads group. So you'll find that whichever part of the UK that you're in, there will be an offer for disability inclusion training. And I think that's hugely important because we have a large cohort of clubs, leisure opportunities, that if we want people to be active in the easiest way possible, that needs to be something that's available on people's doorstep. And very often we may have clubs. So Adam, from a wheelchair football perspective, it's something that we've just recently in Wales have 2 new wheelchair football clubs. So there are some clubs and opportunities where there may not be the same level of offer as some of the non-disabled mainstream sports and clubs that are there. And sometimes that might be because they're, it's very impairment specific, but it's about how can we work with everyone on our doorstep to make everything as inclusive as possible, so that if we have a youngster who lives in Denbighshire who wants to play football, they can go along and do that. Or if someone lives in Deeside area or in Cardiff, what is on offer on their doorstep. And I think a huge barrier is sometimes that even how far down the line we are from a Disability Sport Wales perspective is that not everyone necessarily knows about where those opportunities are and who to contact to find out a little bit more. And I think we still have a large amount of work to do around how do we support teachers. So we were having a conversation in one of the groups earlier that I was part of, and finding that we're having an increasing number of disabled children in mainstream education, and the cohorts of children and young people from an education perspective, things are looking very different to what they were 10 years ago. So I think huge barriers. Yes, we have issues around access, but I think first and foremost it's around perceptions and awareness, and where do we go for information, and how do we increase people's knowledge.
Definitely. I think perception is such a big thing, because I know that that's one thing that we talk a lot about in Move, obviously raising those expectations and challenging people's perception of disabled young people, like not hamstringing them before they've even given you a chance to show you what they can do. I hope that a lot of the schools on the call today, obviously the majority of them will use the Move programme already. I hope they're very much in that mindset and, wanting to influence other organisations and reach out and partner with other organisations who, can support them to enable their young people to access sport. In terms of barriers, Holly, could you tell us a bit about, kind of your experience accessing sport as a young person? And obviously now you've been given the chance to shine and, show your your full potential, but it'd be great if you could tell us a bit about your experience when you were younger.
Yeah, so I've always been interested in sport as a young kid. Dad got me into everything, football, rugby, you name it. you know, and like I say, we was a sporty family, and there was an event back in Cleethorpes. I'm a Grimsby girl, and that's, you know, where we're from, and it was an event to go there and just try every single sport. So me and my brother went there, and I just remember I had no idea about any of these things or what they obviously, you know, running and jumping and throwing, but I didn't know about the implements or, you know, what they actually did. And I remember my brother picking up the javelin, and I was like, I want to beat him. I want to copy him, you know, be the little annoying sister who always wants to win. And it literally from there, from being at that moment, that the club was like, have you ever thrown javelin before? And I'm like, no, I have no idea what it is. I'm like 11 years old. So I joined Cleethorpes Athletics Club. Now I think I was the only disabled person there. To start with. So at first it didn't matter to me. I didn't realize that I was different. Obviously I knew I was different. I had one arm, but I never felt like I was different. But there were certain things where the coaches and development at that time, when I was 11 years old, they didn't particularly know how to, help with disability or explain certain things, because a lot of coaches, like my coach, always forgets that I'm obviously left-handed, and he does things on the right hand and he's like, oh God, you blooming lefty. And I'm like, sorry. But at that time, there was obviously a lot of barriers for me, just as learning as a young athlete who wanted to get into this sport. Then I found something where you could go to Blackpool, and it was array of different disabilities, and it was so amazing to see so many different disabilities, people who look like me, and I was like, this is really cool. We just all went there and competed, and they made me do everything, by the way, throwing, jumping, sprinting. I hated it. I was like, I just want to do the throwing. And that for me, that was a big learning curve, because I had no idea that I wanted to just do javelin. So I did that in the next couple of years, leading up to like 13 years old. And I actually had to go to Holland. Somebody from Wales, my old coach, said that if you want to try and get to Beijing Paralympics, you need to go there and try and throw the qualifying distance. No, I was thinking, I'm 13 years old. I'm sure as hell not going to qualify for Beijing Paralympics. Anyway, luckily I threw the distance, but that doesn't mean you're 100% going. So at the time, we had the phone call and we're like, you're going to Beijing? And I was like, what? It was just mental. So I'd gone from very little competing with disability, knowing about disability, and having somebody who knows so much about disability sport, to then going into the Paralympics at 14. Obviously that was an incredible experience, because we talk about barriers and things like that. Obviously I was away from my mum and dad for a month. Okay, so I was with the team. I was loving life, of course, 14-year-old, no parents, yes. But the barriers were, you look at Beijing to London Paralympics, it was never shown. People weren't shown as disability, or it was very taboo, it was very hidden. And then when we came to London Paralympics, we were on billboards and posters and adverts, and people saw, I'm just being honest, people saw Paralympics and disability sport as oh, bless them, they can do that, that'll be fine for them. And I'm like, you want to come to the Paralympics and just watch what we all do. We train hard, we have a dream and expectations of ourselves. And when people came to London, it absolutely changed people's perceptions of us. They were like, these athletes, because that's what we are, these athletes are incredible, and they go out there and they train hard every day for these moments. And the movement changed. So that was some sort of barriers that were held down for us, which was really nice. There's still so many barriers around. I feel like there's a lot of expectation for young athletes to always be, if they're disabled, it's, oh, you need to be in the Paralympics. No, you don't have to be. Like, if you want to just go out there and enjoy people, it's great for your mental health, like Adam said, and everybody, it's so physically and mentally great for you. Being a part of the team, obviously I'm an individual sport, but I have a whole team around me, and that's how it makes it work. But just feel like there's a lot of pressure there of, if you're quite talented, you kind of forced into the Paralympic way, and that's not always what people want. And nowadays, obviously I've been on sort of funding development since I've been 14, and we never had things like Para Pathway, and also now we have Futures Academy and Development Academy. So there's a variety of different places and different things to do, and development and coaches and access. And I guess the other barriers for me was I had to move. So I lived in Grimsby and I moved to Wales for 7 years to get access to disability coaches, strength and conditioning, nutritionist, physio. And that was tough. You know, I was a young kid and my mom and dad sacrificed their life for me, for my career. So there is always barriers, and we are getting better, you know, and you guys, especially on the panel, are doing an absolute fantastic job of seeing the younger generation hopefully come through, whatever that means for them, whether it's playing on a team, to go into the Paralympics, whatever they want to do. I just feel like we need to really try and help and support people, because I've had such a, you know, I've not had it easy, but I have a fantastic support network to actually get me where I am today. So I didn't feel like the barriers, I haven't had particularly, you know, an immense barriers, but I know people who have done, and I think we really need to keep working and pushing at that. So we need to close them barriers down.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that, Holly. Yeah, it's really, really good to hear kind of, you know, your perspective, where you've come from, and, you know, what supported you as well. Because I think definitely, you know, the fact that you've had such a supportive family, and I know Hilmi Shawal, who was our keynote speaker earlier, he mentioned that as well, that his family have just been so fantastic and so supportive. And I mean, some of our attendees today will have attended a workshop yesterday that one of our Move trainers ran on family engagement. And I think that family engagement in, you know, getting them to believe in their child's abilities and just encourage them to, you know, raise their own expectations, because I know that obviously those perceptions just get drilled into parents from as soon as their child is born, that, you know, they're not going to get very far when it's just not true. So I think it's really important to hear that perspective, and kind of thinking about how our schools can support their children that they support to gain more access to sports. Greer, do you have any ideas of how Move practitioners can support their students to access sport in the community?
Yep, thanks, Verity. So in my opinion, schools and Move practitioners can support their students by ensuring that, you know, there are ample engaging opportunities and activities available to their students, whether that's in school or as you said, in the community. I think it's important that they are encouraging, and whatever their students are striving for, sporting or otherwise, a listening ear is provided. I think it's essential for schools and Move practitioners to provide accessible, inclusive, and intersectional opportunities. If students are unable to find sporting opportunities around them, you know, it's the role of the schools and the practitioners to empower their students in-house and encourage their voices, their goals, and, you know, their skills, trying to hone their skills. You know, in my opinion, it's the job of the school and the practitioners to challenge and change the narrative of sports around, making sure that it's accessible, and accessibility being the grounding structure for that change. You know, encouraging community collaboration, aiming to reduce that isolation and loneliness that a lot of, you know, young disabled people suffer from, whilst improving their skill and sporting access. In terms of opportunities that I might be aware of, you know, that's location dependent. There are several opportunities available, but they're sometimes hard to find. Whether, you know, that's one-to-one support or group sports. I know of several people from some people in South London. Let's Get Active. That's a really good, you know, one-to-one and group support network that works with a lot of young people, regardless of ability. And, you know, disability sports coach who runs so many in-school sessions and community club sessions as well. Sorry, I was just reading the chat. You know, accessible sporting opportunities have been really difficult to come by, with a lot of providers may be not having the necessary confidence or skills to, you know, provide that accessible and inclusive structure. But, you know, at Disability Sports Coach, we provide excellent training courses and facilities, you know, that can engage new and established coaches. helping them to gain insight and knowledge of inclusive and accessible sporting practice. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say fantastic, thank you. Yeah, I think obviously we've got 3 great organisations on the call today: Disability Sports Coach, Disability Sport Wales and the Wheelchair Football Association. So those are all organisations that our school can check out. So in terms of finding these opportunities, do any of you have any ideas or any insights in where schools kind of look to find these opportunities? You know, because obviously, Greer, like you say, it's location specifics. Obviously, different organisations work in different areas. But do you have any ideas of how a school who's just starting out and doesn't know what opportunities are in their area, how they can go about finding that information?
I've just cheekily popped into the chat there. We have our website on Disability Sport Wales. You can go to the place section, and if you click on which county your school or where you live, or where you could potentially travel to, if you click on those areas, what you'll find is the local officer for that area. So currently, Disability Sport Wales has a community development officer at grassroots across every local authority across Wales. So we have 22 people in post. So you'll be able to find out the contact details for them. If you find nothing else on our website, use that person as the main contact in your area, and they will let you know where to gain information about if there's a particular club. So for example, I mentioned earlier about our wheelchair football provision. You know, we have a club in Wrexham and we're looking to have a club in Cardiff. So it might be a case that if you have a particular interest in a particular sport, they'll be able to let you know where the closest one is to you, as we find that for some of our sports and clubs and activities, it might be that we've got a regional approach to that just because of numbers and travel and so on. So for us, it would be go to the website and you'll be able to find out or be able to contact someone that will point you in the right direction or be able to support you in some way.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know that we've kind of got one final question to pose to the panelists, but one's just popped up in the chat, which is from Louise saying, how can we as advocates for accessibility encourage local leisure centres to be more inclusive and provide functional equipment to make facilities accessible? Does anyone have any ideas around that? So not necessarily engaging, you know, organisations that already kind of provide inclusive sport opportunities, but how they can encourage their local facilities to be more inclusive. Does anyone have any input on that?
Yeah, I'll have a go.
Go on, Adam.
How many different ways to try and attack things, I suppose. I think it's going on personal experiences. I think it's around that, having those conversations and challenging your facility providers around, well, what have you got? What do you do? Do you know how many people, young people, older people that have got additional needs that live in the local areas or surrounding areas, because they might want or they could access your facilities if provision was available? And it's almost that put that ball in their court around what do they do or what could they do. I know from experience, we've had similar conversations with venues around access for wheelchair users, and some facilities being of the slightly older, so not necessarily being the most accessible. Well, can you engage with your local authority, the council, the councillors around supporting this and changing this provision, because there is a real, gaps in the market for what you could provide to the wider community. And I think it's just that raising that awareness and trying to put the ball in their court to try and do something, potentially bringing people to them, not physically, but that we know that we have X amount of people that would like to engage in this. Your facility is a perfect example to be able to host this, but this is the stumbling block we've got at the moment. Can we work together to to solve this. We've had some facilities that haven't had great accessible changing facilities and toileting provision. The absolute bare minimum of what's the disabled toileting facility as well. It's where the cleaner keeps all of their kit for doing all the provision and cleaning everything in the centre. Well, that's not great, is it? That's not what you want to portray as being an accessible and inclusive facility for your local community. And then we've had instances where they've worked together with clubs, local authorities to access a little bit of funding support to improve that quality, or put in a changing places facility so that it's actually more accessible for people to come in, and therefore people are more willing to attend because they know that there's some basic provision there for them. So I think I suppose that's a long-winded way of saying it's that engagement around challenging them. If there's provision that's needed, or if there's a gap in the area that could be filled by that, can they work together? Do they have that inclination? And challenging them to go, well, you should be doing more, or you're not doing enough. Let's change that. Because ultimately, if you look at it from a cynical point of view, it's good PR from them, from their point of view as well. If they're seen to be doing more to be more inclusive, it's something that they would see as useful opportunity for their marketing to say, come along, come to our facility, come and spend your money, etc., etc. So the benefits for them are there if they're willing to be a little bit more open-minded towards it, I would say.
Yeah,
I think it's a really tough one. I think Adam's right in what he's saying about that engagement and that partnership working. I think it is frustrating because that we're so far down the line now of this being law in terms of accessibility of venues, from the DDA to the Equality Act. But I think we're still continuing to find situations where centres aren't necessarily accessible. I'd agree in that partnership working and that engagement and the challenge, and just raising that this is something that people should be doing, but also whichever home nation you're residing in, get that support from your disability sport organisation, whether that be Disability Sport Wales, Activity Alliance, SDS, Disability Sport Northern Ireland, depending on where you're based. There will be someone that will be able to help support what Adam's talking about here, about that engagement and about the partnership working and finding pockets of funding. And I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done around leisure, around them really understanding the demographics of who lives in their area, who are their members. If we're considering stats wherever you are across the UK or Europe, wherever you're from today, there are stats around what percentage of disabled people are in your particular area. So in my area, I know that figure is around 23%. That's such a large percentage of our population that might have some level of impairment, and we need to make sure that if we are community based, that our offer is there for everyone within our community, not people that are more that don't necessarily need any access considerations.
No, definitely. I think that's a great thing to bring up, Donna, and thank you for your contribution as well, Adam. Just thinking about how we can approach different settings and just encouraging them to make their places more accessible. So obviously it's in law, everywhere should be accessible, but we find that just again and again it's not. So I remember, Holly, we spoke briefly last night as well, that how you found that even where you train is sometimes not particularly accessible. Would you like to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I train in Loughborough High Park, it's what we call it. It's the main base for training for university. That's obviously Paralympic and obviously able-bodied. And when you really look at the main car park, there is 2 disabled spaces. One literally right next to the door, and then just one further around. But it's not good enough. Like 2 spaces. There's so many people who are disabled, and not even from the sport side of it as well. There might be people who are coaches and things like that who are disabled and need parking. The parking is terrible anyway. You never ever get a space outside. Even when I went at like 8:30 this morning, no spaces. But this really needs to change, and you know, I'm lucky, obviously, with, yes, you know, I have a badge, but I don't use that because I don't feel like I'd rather somebody else who needs that more, as like, you know, in a wheelchair, who needs to be closer. I don't. So yeah, that's obviously a challenge. And to be honest, I don't even know who I would speak to about that within, because it might be the university. So you know, on campus, I really don't know who that needs. I mean, I don't really know if anyone's actually, you know, brought that conversation up. I guess because they're so used to having just two spaces, people just kind of accept that. But that's a problem with our whole society. We, as disabled people, we accept it because, you know, we're not in the forefront of people's minds. We're very much back. And it's like, oh, there's a disabled space there, it's fine. there's quite a lot of disabled people in this world, in this country. And unfortunately, you know, people really need that help and to be closer. You know, a lot of my friends from the Paralympics, they have a lot severe disability than I do. So when I look at them and what one of my friends has to do to get out of the car into a wheelchair, and I'm like, this, you know, and this really needs changing. So I don't know if I can speak to anybody about that, just for other people, to make sure we have better car parking spaces, and priority for obviously sport and also disability.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's such an important thing to bring up, you know, the idea that you have to think, I'm disabled, but I don't feel disabled enough to use this space. Like, there's someone who needs it more than me. You think, in theory and in practice, there should be enough for everyone. Like, you should base it off the need in your particular organisation, kind of be reviewing that. I feel like a lot of the time it's just kind of a tick box, like, oh, we have 2 disabled spaces, so technically that means we're a bit accessible. But yeah, it's definitely not good enough. But just to pick up on you know, kind of the things that you do as part of your sporting career, Holly, be interesting just to hear a bit more about kind of what your training schedule looks like and kind of how you motivate yourself to, you know, get up and keep going every day, especially, you know, sporting careers. Obviously no one can be on the top performance all the time. Like, when you've fallen down, how you've picked yourself back up and how you've, you know, achieved all the amazing things that you have achieved.
Yeah, obviously recently I've just come back from Tokyo with a bronze medal. Now, to a lot of other people and people who know me, think that's amazing, and it is amazing because it's a medal. But to me, it's I let myself down, and I should have won gold. But you know, it took a whole pandemic to take me down. So I guess in a way, you know, it kind of proves that I still want more. And as athletes, you know, we're very harsh on ourselves. We have a lot on ourselves as well. That's funding and things like that. And unfortunately now I've moved down funding. I've been winning for 9 years in a row, gold medals after gold medals, and I've only just realized that, just because time flies by so much. But yeah, and they put me down on funding. But you know what, the money is not the motivation for me. It's the fact that what keeps me going is I know that I was able to win gold medal. That a lot of people and a lot of Paralympic sport has moved on incredible. You know, we're talking from Beijing to London to Rio to now Tokyo. My event has got bigger and better, but I'm right in the midst of being the best. And I think that I was heartbroken. And I'm going to sit there and tell you I was all bubbly. I wasn't. I was an absolute mess when I came back from Tokyo. I felt like I'd let myself down, and more so my family. You know, my family have sacrificed so much for me to get where I am. And coming back with a bronze medal sounds silly, but that was defeat for me. You know, that I really struggled. And I thought, right, okay, what are you going to do about it? Is this going to be a make or break for you? You know, I'm 27 now. I've been in the sport for a very long time, and you know, people are talking about retirement. I'm just kind of looking at them like, no, I'm not retired anytime soon. So I kind of had a real stern word with myself and was like, okay, so what do we do? You know, where do we go now? We've won nearly everything we can do. Obviously, we lost Tokyo. We have the World Championships again in Tokyo, in Kobe. Then we have another World Championships because everything's messed up and we don't know where that is. And then it's obviously Paris, the next Paralympics. And we had a good conversation with my coach, and you know, he actually asked me, and this is why I love my coach so much, don't tell him that, he sat me down and he said, I need to ask you a serious question. I thought, oh, here we go, what's going on here? And he said, do you want to move back to Wales to be with Josh, my boyfriend? I obviously lived in Wales, South Wales, for 7 years, and obviously I loved Wales. That was my home. And I said to him, no. And he was like, okay, thank God. And I said, why did you ask me that? And he said, because if you weren't happy, and that is what something that would make you happy and better training, and we could deal with you coming down and how we would work that out in training. And I just kind of looked at him, and that was something that I never thought he would ask me. And to be fair, I've never really asked that myself. And as much as I would love to be with my partner, where I have to be right now is Loughborough. You know, the places I need to be, it's the sacrifices I need to make. And I thought that was really amazing from a coach perspective from you guys. It's that level of friendship that I have with my coach, that he actually wanted to make sure that above all, my mental health was number one priority, not my sporting achievements, not the gold medal or the bronze medal hanging around my neck. It was, you know, where I was in life. And I think that's so important to take from everybody's perspective. Is they are individuals, we are humans first, we're not athletes first, we're humans first. And I think I have to reiterate that to a lot of people all the time. And yeah, so my motivation is the fact that I won a bronze medal, and the fact that I'm very competitive, and there was a kind of a new girl who joined from Dutch, and she unfortunately pit me right at the last throw. And she's young, and she doesn't know much about the sport right now. And when she looked at me and smiled at me as if to say, like, she's beating me, and I was like, oh, you have no idea. You don't know who Holly Arnold is whatsoever. So that really motivates me. Is the fire. The fire's always been burning, but COVID and Paralympics not going ahead last year really mentally ruined me. Really did. You know, I'm just being honest. I think it's really important that I had to take 3 months off training. I physically lost my ability to be who I was. I had no structure in my life. And, you know, for a person, this is my job, this is my life, I love it. And for something to be taken away from me, you know, I've been training since I've been 14 for this. It's not a 4-year cycle constantly. It's not, you know, we don't just train for 4 years. I've trained for years and years and years for this opportunity. So my fire's been lit extra, and I think it's just the support I've had from my family. And, you know, we still love you, and, you know, it doesn't matter what you win or what you achieve, you know, we're just proud of you. And I think that really settles in when I came back and was like, do you know what? I've achieved a bronze medal at my 4th Paralympics. I still got there. I still got on that line when it was chucking down with rain. Who'd have thought Tokyo? Thanks, Tokyo. But yeah, and I think it's just the positivity from other people, which really helps me. My day in, day out, my coach, my family, my boyfriend, they're all a massive part of my life. My psychologist, sorry, you know, they're all there to tap into to get the best out of Holly. And I wish that everybody could have that. I know not everyone's fortunate to have the incredible circle that I do. And I'm really lucky for that. So bring on the next few years.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Holly. And I think something that's really come out of that, again, is just the power of the team. Because I know that we've been banging on about our values the past couple of days just because we've recently launched them. But yeah, kind of our better together value. It really does prove that, you know, teamwork and having that supportive team around you to enable you to be the best that you can be is just so important. We all need that, especially for disabled young people who, you know, and kind of be trapped by low expectations. So I think it's so important that, you know, we continue to set our sights high and, you know, really empower them to be the best that they can be. So thank you all. To kind of round off this discussion, one final question for you all I wanted to ask was, what would your one takeaway be for each attendee, to like one takeaway that they should put into action coming away from this talk to better support their young people to access sport? Doesn't have to be long, it can just be a little thing just to round us out. Go on, Adam.
Yeah, I think for me, the key word for that is engagement. And by that, I mean engagement both individually, so within the young person, the young people that they're working with, whether it's recognition of what could be potential talent or just enjoyment, that initial engagement and recognition of that. And then I think from there, it's around being positive advocates for that. So then maybe it could be building that on further. So, you know, working in educational environments, it's engagement with maybe the parents at parents' evenings, or when, you know, you're reviewing how the progression of the son or daughter is getting on around showing an aptitude for this. Potentially you as family could consider maybe exploring that, because they seem to be doing really well, enjoying it. If there's engagement in, you know, OT's physio network, engagement with them as well around another positive voice coming from them, working with that young person, that individual, to say, oh, I've heard you're doing really well at this, and try and reaffirm that message. And then maybe engagement externally on with the organizations, sporting organizations, whether it's locally or nationally, finding out about what is available, where it's available, engagement with them to say, we might have someone that's maybe gifted and talented, or just want to know about opportunities, you know, participation, grassroots, moving through to competition. And it's just, I think for me, it's that word engagement and those different facets of what that means to act as positive influences and role models going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking to people, getting the word out, getting people involved, I think that's really important. Does anyone else have anything that they really want people to take away from this?
Really simple for me is education on disability and different disability. I think, like, I'm really open about my disability. I was born without my right forearm. We have no idea why. Apparently I punched my mum's womb inside, something like that. Sounds like me, to be honest, but there's still, you know, and my S&C coach when I first moved to Loughborough and started working with Sam is obviously, you know, he's never worked with somebody at that time, he was new to the job, with somebody who has one arm. And it's about, it has to be a line of obviously sensitivity. It's not making them feel like they can't do something because they're disabled. It's the way you ask and the way you say things. It's like, right, okay, so how can we adapt something for you? And I think that is so important, because like, I think my first story literally was said to Sam was like, you know, how do you use your arm a lot? And I was like, yeah, I use my arm loads. I said, like, I do my hair, my makeup, and my shoes and this and that. And then I said, and when my brother really annoyed me, I punched him in the face and broke his nose. And I think that was like, he was like, okay, I'm not going to mess with you. And I just think I wanted to make him feel comfortable, just because I wanted to make him sure that, like, I'm okay with you asking me questions about my arm, or, you know, again, it's about adapting. It's not, don't ever think that you can't do something, because when people tell you you can't, they really can. It doesn't matter how disabled they are, or you know, it just really annoys me when people think that disability is like a limit on things. We don't. There is no limit. It's just that education of just making sure it's the way you say things, or the way you can come across, and let, you know, build that relationship with them so they can trust you and just open up to you. Because naturally, you know, I'm good at that, but I know it takes a long time to build that relationship with a lot of people, especially young disabled kids. So yeah, mine's just education, and just, you know, be yourselves. Don't also be afraid of offending them, because we live in a world now where, you know, our God, the jokes, I'm not even going to say the amount of jokes that I make about my arm, but we you know, we have good jokes and have laugh and banter. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, it sounds silly, but I'm never going to grow an arm back. This is me, this is who I am. So I have to embrace that. And I think that's what that's what I would like, obviously, people to know, and hopefully that little piece of advice will help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important, particularly around education, because I know one of our Move practitioners has said around finding opportunities, particularly for disabled young people who have quite complex needs, because obviously someone might look at them and think, oh, it's too hard to you know, adapt a sport for them. And I think our Move practitioners can really kind of flex their muscles and show their expertise in that area, because obviously all of our attendees today, the majority of you will work in special schools, and like, you know your stuff, you know how to support young people with complex needs. So I think kind of don't be afraid to engage with other organisations and kind of teach them, and be willing to share your knowledge and say, you know, this is what we do, and you know, we can offer this expertise, and can you please offer us services, you know, resources, your facilities, and we can make something work, and we can make sure that these young people are involved and have access to this. I think definitely don't be afraid to flex your expertise and say, no, I know a lot about this, and you know a lot about your area of remit. I know a lot about mine. How about we work together and create, you know, a really inclusive space for our children. Greer and Donna, do you have any last thoughts before we close this up?
Yeah, I mean, just piggybacking off what everyone else has said, I think also, you know, don't be afraid to challenge the current narratives that exist as well. I think it's amazing what everyone here has been doing and what, you know, the attendees do with their practice as well. Yeah, challenge those narratives and make sure that, you know, whatever you want to do, whatever your students and staff want to do, you support that, and you help everyone to realize their potential in whatever they want to do and whatever they, you know, are striving for.
Fantastic, thanks, Greer. And Donna, not to put you on the spot.
I think for me, I think it would be to make sure that you remember how important each and every one of you are as an individual and what difference you can make as an individual. You don't have to be the head teacher, you don't have to be the head of service for a particular area, whichever role you're performing, whether you're here as a parent, as a teacher, as a lead for a particular area, as a physio, as an OT, whichever role that you have, you all have the power to make a really positive difference to someone's life. And that might be a case of making someone aware that there's something that they can do. It might be a case of passing over contact details. That might be the thing that makes a difference for that person's life. And I think sometimes we think, I'm not important enough, or that's not my role, but we all have huge power within us to make a difference on a positive basis for people's lives.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Donna. So thank you everyone for attending this session, and thank you all our amazing panelists for your insights. I think it's been a really useful discussion. I've really enjoyed it, chatting to you all today about making sport more inclusive, particularly for, you know, disabled young people that a lot of our, well, all of our schools work with, in fact. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you so much to our 4 amazing panelists for sharing their insights today.